And what is going on, Devils fans? It is, as always, your host, your best friend, your confidant, your number one source, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to another edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as Sports Wire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about your overtime struggling, and I mean overtime struggling, New Jersey Devils. And as always, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check this episode out. Hope you are having a great day despite last night's overtime loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Definitely a lot of frustration, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We do have a special guest joining us who I haven't had on the podcast in a long time, and I feel bad that I haven't, but he is a good buddy of mine, and I'm really excited to have him on. But really quickly, before we bring him on, just want to shout out our sponsors down below. Of course, we got DraftKings. Use promo code THPN. You bet $5, you get $150 in risk-free bet money. So make sure you guys sign up with DraftKings and use our promo code THPN to get in on all the huge cash prizes, especially with the NFL playoffs getting into the divisional round starting this weekend. So this is a really good time to jump on that. Also, shout out to Tom's River Brewing Company. They are a great official sponsor of the Devil's State of Mind podcast. Make sure you go and get yourself some delicious stick toss. They are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I appreciate them as always. Also, shout out to them for helping out with that Jesper Bratt autograph picture giveaway. And there might be another Tom's River Brewing Devil's State of Mind giveaway coming up in in a little bit of time. A little bit of time. Just going to tease you right there. But we have a bunch to get to here on the Devil's State of Mind podcast. So let's not waste any more time and get rolling. And of course, as I mentioned before, we have a special guest joining us. Hasn't been on the podcast in a minute, but it is with great pleasure we welcome on Mr. Jersey Joe. Joe, what is going on, my friend? Welcome back to the Devil's State of Mind podcast. First and foremost, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, despite the overtime loss in Toronto and the shootout to the Florida Panthers, I was actually at that game versus Florida. I will say that is the most defensive game I've seen them play since what, maybe a year ago when they were playing against Minnesota when Philip Gustafson was called up,
Mm,
and
mm.
I think it was what, Vanacek or Schmid, no, or Jake Allen. But anyways, this was the most intense defensive game goalie duel I've seen in quite some time. But I understand people at the games were, like, oh, get your heads out of your know what, like Frank the Tank would say. I heard him, and I yelled out loud. I said, "Keep it kosher, Frank. Keep it kosher." And I don't think he understands that phrase, but it just means
I
keep
don't
it
think so.
clean. So I always tell people those kind of games start out like honey. They start out rather slow, but then it gets sweeter as the game goes on. So this form of eloquency does come on, for a better time. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, the Devils are struggling in overtime a little bit, but our worst is better than most other teams' worst. It's
Hmm.
better than most teams.
No, I think you nailed it on the head. I actually was also at the game against Florida a couple days ago, and yeah, it's obviously a frustrating loss because you felt like the Devils deserved a better result than they ended up getting. But again, the Devils' struggles in the shootout. I mean, this has been going on for years now. This is nothing new to Devils fans. It's been frustrating. We did get to see a highlight reel goal from Paul Cotter though, which was awesome. But other than that, not much really to sniff there. And then, like you mentioned, you go into that Toronto game, big game for Sheldon Keefe, his first game back in Toronto since becoming the Devils head coach. And the Devils had three different leads in this game. Jack Hughes ending up with a 3-point night, including getting himself the game's first goal. Nico Hischier with two power play goals. He now has set a new career high for power play goals with eight now. But the Devils, in my opinion, Joe, played a way too defensive, penalty kill like game every time that they got the lead back. Every time they got the lead, they seemed to fall back and play defensive hockey, and it became very frustrating, especially in that third period when it felt like it was only a matter of time before the Leafs took the lead. But fortunately enough, it was able to go to overtime. And despite the Devils having a couple of chances, including Luke Hughes missing the goal by hitting the post, he then unfortunately hurts the Devils tremendously by finding the worst possible time to take a line change and
It,
leave William Nylander all alone for a breakaway chance. He scores, and the Leafs beat the Devils 4-3 in overtime. So the Leafs finish 3-0 against the Devils this year. So one of the teams the Devils certainly had a lot of struggles with against this season, but fortunately, the Devils will not see them again the rest of this regular season, and we'll see if they end up meeting them at some point down the road in the playoffs. But Joe, I wanted to get your quick thoughts on last night's overall performance from the Devils.
I mean, look, you're going up against their core four minus the one that was out in John Tavares. You went against their deadly trio. You pretty much handled them as good as you could.
Yeah,
And if you minus off Nylander's overtime winner, I mean, you kept pretty much the three-headed dragon at bay for the most part. It didn't completely kill them. It bit them, but it didn't kill them.
mm,
So what I'm saying is like Nico Heischer bit but didn't kill the Maple Leafs, but he took out a lot of the air from Air Canada Center, as I still call it. I mean, that's I don't recognize the new Nova Scotia
that's the
place
old
or
school coming out
whatever
of
they
Joe, by
call
the
it,
way.
all this corporate naming. I could care less, but to me, it's still Toronto. But
Yeah.
that's me being 35 going on 36. But do I really give a crap about the Leafs winning that game? No. I care about Markstrom looking really good in front of a very tough crowd. It looked amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean he again for the sixth consecutive game. I mean it's been more than six straight games. I mean Markstrom was phenomenal. He really didn't do. Yeah, he gave up 3 goals, but at the end of the day, he was put into a really tough position where he could only do so much. He finished with nearly 40 saves on the night, and yeah, people want to give him crap for not making that save on the William Nylander breakaway. But then again, that breakaway should have never happened in the first place, especially in overtime with Luke Hughes basically just finding the worst possible time to go change lines. I mean, it was just bad communication, a lot of miscommunication, which I feel like has been one of the issues I've noticed from the Devils of late is that they seem to be struggling with communicating with one another in terms of setting things up, particularly in overtime. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes, a lot of just lackadaisical passes, and most importantly, bad turnovers that have led to game winning goals for the other team. So, yeah, like you said, it's frustrating, but it is truly not the end of the world because while the Devils have been struggling, they are they're still finding ways to get points and keep themselves afloat, in second place in the Metro. And, especially, I mentioned this on Twitter last night, Joe, and you kind of harped on it a little bit. The Devils are not the only team that's been struggling at this point in the year. I mean, the Leafs came into last night's game on a 3-game losing streak, and even the Carolina Hurricanes have only won 3 of their last like 10 plus games. Like they really have been struggling as well. So it's not like the Devils are the only ones. The fact that they are struggling yet still getting points is a win in itself. And the hope that you obviously get from that is, once they figure it out, they'll start to get rolling again. And you look at this weekend, Joe, and I would argue to say this is one of the bigger weekends for the Devils this season.
It's one of the more easier schedules. I mean, nothing is easy, but it's easier on paper. If you look at the teams that they have, like Philadelphia doesn't strike fear to me as much as like a year ago. They're going through a lot of coaching troubles and they're going through goalie troubles as well. I mean, I know they got that one really good Russian goalie that they drafted over a year ago who, if he didn't make the team out of camp, he would have gone back. But long story short, I mean, uh, Devils are very favorable to win that matchup versus Philly, but they can't take them lightly. What
Yeah.
they need to do is they need to start playing more 1-3-1 blue line traps, more 4-on-1 neutral zone traps. When you do those kind of things, you clog up the neutral zone and the blue line, you're going to create more opportunities for someone like Jacob Markstrom to make out those breakout passes, reset the play, kind of like what Brodeur used to do I'm not
Hmm.
saying he is, but he's following a playbook that has been strung together by Sheldon Keefe to play to those strengths of his players. One guy that the Devils really miss right now is Stefan Nason. If the Devils had Nason in overtime, they probably would have got maybe 2 more points out
Yeah.
of the last 2 games. Maybe
Hmm.
they win in overtime or regulation versus Florida. Maybe they win uh, the other game versus Toronto in Toronto. But having guys like Hardman and in the AHL, I mean guys like that, big guys throw heavy hits.
Hmm.
You need these kind of hard forecheckers
Yeah.
who can really do the gritty work on the bottom six.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it. Stefan Nason's been out the last two games. It's pretty much clear that he's dealing with the neurovirus. Somebody mentioned to me that Nason's wife mentioned that the her and the kids have been dealing with the neurovirus. So it's pretty clear that that's what Nason's dealing with. And I also just want to say this. I did see this on Twitter last night. We don't know how much the sickness is affecting the rest of the team. It might be not as bad for some other guys. I mean, Sheldon Keefe has mentioned the last two games that the Devils have been, there's certain lineup changes that could be made. And I think that's all based off of just the physical feeling of some of these guys. So it's possible. I think it might have been more noticeable last night because there were times when the Devils looked gassed. I mean, really, like just a step behind. They did not look like that they were fully physically into that game. I'm not making excuses for
it it's
losing
happening
that game.
league wide again. I mean, when I'm not sure if it's vitamin D deficiencies, but it sounds like you know guys who aren't taking enough of the like D3 and stuff like that in their diets or getting enough sunlight. It hurts
Yeah.
these guys. But when it comes to getting their oxygen, this is why during the draft combine they do V2 oxygen levels to see where these guys are at their best.
Yeah.
And they get evaluated going forward when they get brought up. But what I mean is, you know, Tom Fitzgerald as a GM, he's going to have to, speak of prospect, you're going to have to move on from Simon Nemec, who I wanted 2 years ago. But it's easy for me to track the player skills wise and talent wise and potential.
Hmm.
It's hard to get inside if you're not talking to the player and being around the player.
Right.
That's why Tomáš Prokop, the Slovak guy who writes online, he
Yeah.
covers, he does that stuff. And you know what? Javis Casey's around. You have Tobias Velen around. You have so many other guys banging on opportunities' door. Some guys may not be ready yet, but
Mm.
this makes push to shove. And you know what? I think Jonathan Kovacevic is going to come sign an extension
Yeah.
eventually. And this is why potentially Nemec, if he doesn't get traded at the deadline in March 8th
Hmm.
by 3 p.m., I
Hmm.
think the Devils make a big splash right around the 2025 NHL draft, considering the 10th overall pick that they traded for Markstrom to Calgary is all said and done. But the Devils can go get a late first or another second, a couple other roster players that can
Yeah.
fortify the defense.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of good points, and I think to kind of wrap up, this first part that we're talking about, because I do want to get your thoughts on the whole Shimon Nemec situation that's happened the last couple of days. Um, Really, I think the reality is that the Devils are going through a tough stretch. They've been going through a tough stretch since they got back from the holiday break, which is not great. But at the end of the day, they haven't really lost a whole lot of ground completely. Like, yeah, obviously, the Capitals continue to be where they are. They're having a phenomenal year, but the Devils continue to hold on to that second spot in the Metro Division while the Hurricanes are still struggling and everything like that. So, I mean, the sky is not falling here, Devils fans. I'll
No,
tell you that. And I think it's going to be really interesting. I mentioned on Twitter, and obviously it was made clear. Brian Halonen was brought up from Utica. He leads the team in goals. He's had a really, really strong year on a struggling Comets team. Surprised he didn't play last night. I felt that he should have been in there over McDermott, but I mean, who knows what the reasoning behind it was. I expect Halonen, unless Stefan Nason's able to come back, I expect Halonen to get in at least one, maybe both games over the weekend. So we will see. So just to really kind of you know bring this all together, Devils have back-to-back games this weekend at home. Both day games. They will play 1 o'clock tomorrow on Saturday against the Flyers, and then they'll start a noon game at home against the Ottawa Senators. Two very winnable games coming up, and this might be the weekend that the Devils can, get right. So
Yeah.
now let's shift really quickly here, Joe, to the Simon Nemec slash. I'm going to say slash because I feel like I need to get your thoughts on this slash JT Miller, Elias Pettersson rumors because they might go they might go hand in hand depending on things. So Simon Nemec, prior to his 5-point game a couple nights ago, was interviewed by a reporter, a European reporter, and
Tomas Prokop.
Tomas Burkov, thank you, Joe. And Nemec pretty much was expressing, obviously, he's not thrilled that he's playing down in Utica. He feels that he can play in the NHL, and I can understand that since he played all of last year in the NHL for the most part. And he said, mainly the thing that stands out to people is he's saying, will I do something like David Riddick did, where I asked for a trade? It's possible. I think at the end of the day, those quotes got taken a bit out of context. Um, but I think Nemec also is expressing his frustration and wanting to get back up in the NHL. And I think that he still will get an opportunity, whether it's this year or, going into next year, who knows. And then also really quickly, we got the crazy reporting that came out 2 nights ago, late 2 nights ago. Nick Kyprios reported that don't be surprised if the Devils are really looking into JT Miller and or Elias Pettersson in a trade. And that was a shocking thing because it didn't seem like the Devils, A, could make a deal like that happen. I mean, we don't know exactly. And B, why exactly the Devils would be looking for that when we've talked about adding to the bottom six, maybe adding a depth defenseman, going after either one of those guys who have a big amount of money on their contract seems like a big risk. But let's kind of go back to the first part of this show. What are your thoughts on the whole Simon Nemec situation?
Well, first off, he's a restricted free agent looking for an extension. He's trying to get the most out of his deal. He's trying to get his leverage,
Mm-hmm.
like his counterpart from Czechia. Well, he's from Slovakia, but his counterpart in David Yerdyshek got what he wanted to go to
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota to get out of Columbus. I understand Columbus is on the cusp of trying to make the playoffs for the first time in God knows how long.
Couple years.
But it looks like Minnesota got one hell of a haul instead
Mm-hmm.
of uh, just the reverse. I think what the Devils are looking to, if things completely sour on the Simon Nemec front, where he doesn't have as much leverage, but the Devils have complete leverage before they have to extend him in the off season. Remember, he's an RFA, so
Good
this
point.
is still going to give the Devils more benefit of the doubt than the doubt of the doubter.
Mm.
So what I said to our guy Jim Berger yesterday, I said it the Devils could command a first round pick, a top level prospect, and potentially maybe a really good top forward that could suit well on the top nine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given those parameters, I'm not trying to throw names out there for the sake of names, but do you really think Jake Evans is worth that? No, not
That's
at
a
all.
massive overpay.
That is that's a lot of kettle of fish to give up for one bottom six guy.
Yeah.
Me, if I was going to move that somewhat kettle of fish,
Mm-hmm.
I would just trade Nathan Bastian for Justin Brazeau straight up for a bottle of vodka, straight
Mm.
from Poland. Other than that, I am not moving Shimon Nemeth right now. I am
Gotcha.
waiting for the NHL draft because
Yeah.
typically agents get together, but now with the way things are going to be now, because it's going to be decentralized. So it's going to be like you have your own war room, but you're going to be calling that guy's agent, be like, look, We have a team that's better for him.
Hmm.
We want to win now. We want a player that's much better suited for our timeline.
Yeah,
The Devils need a really good bottom six guy. They're going to need another premier sniper on the wing, but the Devils need to make room for Kovacevic's contract, Luke Hughes' contract,
yeah.
and then you got to make way for Gritzuk.
It's true.
And
You make a lot of good points, Joe. And Gritziuk is another guy that has a lot of excitement around him. I've talked about him numerous times. You've talked about him numerous times. Unfortunately, regardless of anything, he won't be on this team at any point this year because of KHL contracts. But he's going to make the jump to the NHL next season. So,
oh yeah,
that'll be a discussion for another day. But with Simon Nemec, to really kind of wrap this up, I think that I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And if things do turn sour, then obviously you'll want to try to move him for something that could be, valuable. And it'll be interesting. We've been told that Kovacevic uh, and the Devils have been talking about an extension. It'll be interesting to see if they can get a deal done before the season ends, because I think that would be a win for Tom Fitzgerald if he can get him for maybe less than what the value he might get on the market. Um, and then obviously you mentioned trying to lock down Luke Hughes as well down the road, and again with Grutziuk, it'll be interesting to see how that all goes down. But with Simon Nemec, who by the way just became the replacement for Seamus Casey at the AHL All Star Game due to Seamus Casey being out with an injury,
yeah.
um, I think right now you just have to just let things be where they are right now. Let him continue to play, and who knows? Something might happen, God forbid, an injury, knock on wood, that might give Nemec the opportunity to come back up to the NHL and contribute. It all depends on how things go as we progress here. But before we get into our last segment here, which I'm really excited about because Joe is my go to guy when it comes to prospects, not just with the Devils, but just in general to really kind of keep people on their toes. I'm going to quickly read off a nice little script from our sponsors over at DraftKings Sportsbook. So here we go. Playoffs. We're talking about playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the playoffs, and you can score big by betting them on DraftKings, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score six. Or you can even bet who you just think is going to win the game. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. And again, I tell people all the time, especially if you're new to sports betting, honestly, just start with betting on who you think is going to win. So you have big time divisional NFL playoffs going on starting this weekend. If you feel confident that the Texans could upset the Chiefs or vice versa, or whatever the case you want to pick, you just pick whoever wins. And if you're right, you get yourself some money, which I think is a great deal for DraftKings. And new DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. And all you have to do, Joe, and everyone listening, is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. All right. So it's Joe's favorite time of this episode, and that is to dive in a little bit into the prospect world. So, Joe, I'm going to give you the floor, and I want you to kind of just give me a rundown of some prospects, whether it's one, two, whatever the case may be, from the Devils that people should be keeping their eye on.
Well, first off, this is going to be a little bit of a long story short. So, if you listen to Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews, I did a scouting report on a goalie that eventually became a Devils selection via the John Marino trade. This
Yeah.
young man, Mikhail Mike
Mhm.
Yegorov, who's a Russian goalie who played for the Omaha Lancers last year and this year. And I had said to Trey Matthews, I said, if the Devils are lucky to get a really good goaltender in this draft, Mikhail Yegorov is going to be the guy because he played on a very crappy Omaha Lancers team. Got bombarded with shots last year and this year.
Mhm.
So last year he committed to Boston University. And then a few days ago, he signed on and he enrolled to play for Boston University. And guess who his coach is? It's former Devil Jay Pandolfo,
Yep.
two-time Stanley Cup winner. So what this does for his development is he's going to play well in front of really strong, suitable defensive players older
Much
than
better
him.
team.
He's going to have a really strong offense in front of him, and mind you, he's going to be able to relax more. He's got a lot of ice in his veins. You know, long story short, and how I found him when he was with Omaha.
Hmm.
He was in front of he was right behind Chase Cheslock. I was scouting Chase Cheslock when I was with Draft Pro,
Hmm.
and I go, "Who the hell is this young goalie?
Hmm.
He doesn't look like your typical North American goalie." You go, Yegorov. Okay, let me check. Moscow, Russia, under 18, under 15 development. Okay, this kid's too good to be a North American. And the more I watched him, the harder it was for me to ignore.
Yeah.
And the better he played in a very horrible environment, I knew there was something special. He looked like a Markstrom. He looked like a Vasilevsky. He looked like a Nabokov. Just the
Mm.
way he made things look easy, had ice in his veins. I'm not trying to upsell anyone, but like it's hard to ignore certain intangibles, and that's why I sent that game report to Trey Matthews, and I actually got the approval by Mike Yegorov himself on Trey's show. So if you're at all looking for that postmark, the 21 and 15-minute mark uh, is when he started to get the whole thing read by Trey from me.
Right.
Um, so he is my favorite prospect this year that is in the double system. Now, number two, I mean, you're not probably thinking a whole lot of, but I really do like the fact that Lenny Heminaho, to
Mm.
like he is still fairly new, but he reminds me of a faster version of Tyler Toffoli, and he can
Mm.
play make, he can snipe, and he's got a lot of will to win, and he's a very humble kid. And I
Love
think the way that you look at Tommy Sinisalo, who's the doubles head of scouting in Finland, he's done a really good job. Like he one year wanted, to vouch for Capo Caco, but we're much happier we got Jack Hughes.
it. Yeah, I think
But
so.
I will say this: getting a couple of other Finnish players over the past couple of years, like VT Luhivarta, a
Mm.
goalie, he's working more on his lateral work. He's got a really strong glove, working on more on his tracking, but he's doing really well in the second stop below Liga. So
Mm.
he's just getting ready to make that leap to Liga as a full timer. So the Devils already have Jakob Malik, who might even be coming over once his contract is up. So,
Follower of the Devil State of Mind podcast, I might add.
so he follows.
He does actually. Yeah, he followed the Instagram page. So shout out to Malik, man. Good kid.
I
Really
wrote
good
an
too.
article on him, and you know what? I like the state of the goaltending that the Devils are in, prospect wise.
Hmm.
But I will say this: like the Devils on defense look pretty good,
Okay.
but I think they need to add a couple more snipers uh, through this draft class. But the thing is, the Devils are a much better day two draft team. So like
Mm.
they don't exactly need like a Cole Iserman type shooter, but
Hmm.
they just need someone like a Haminaho type
Okay.
who's gonna do the job. But the Devils
Yeah.
really, they're more focused on the now.
Okay.
So what I mean is, Devils are looking to add another scorer or another big bottom six guy. Like I mentioned this on a recent article from Pucks and Pitchforks. I want Dylan Cousins for a trade of Dawson Mercer.
Hmm.
I really think the way he's more defensive minded, plus he's a sharper shooter.
Hmm.
Mercer doesn't have the best shot, he does have determination, but sometimes he lacks certain things on his worst days.
Yeah,
But I really love a Dylan Cousins, and he could absolutely be a better fit. And I think a guy like, let's say, Mercer might play better in Buffalo under Lindy Ruff again.
he might. He's had his best years with Lindy for sure.
I think Cousins might play better under Sheldon Keefe, and I think Keefe has
Maybe.
done really well with a lot of the younger guys. I just think certain guys like Tatar and Mercer are the two odd pieces that just don't fit properly in New Jersey under
Mhm.
Sheldon Keefe. We're in a different era now. This is
Yeah.
not Lindy Ruff's system anymore.
Yeah, no, you make good points. I mean, Tatar and Mercer have been two of the guys that a lot of Devils fans have talked about this year as being disappointed. I think that Tom Fitzgerald was hoping when he signed Tatar in the offseason that he would recreate what he did 2 years ago. But it's more, you're seeing more of what we saw last year, where especially in Colorado, where he really just he seems to have lost the step, which comes with obviously getting older. And I think the system that Sheldon Keefe implements just doesn't really work for Tatar. And that's not a knock on Sheldon Keefe nor Tomas Tatar. It's just this happens. And then with Mercer, yeah, I mean it's been a pretty big disappointment since signing his, extension with this team that like he hasn't fully gotten going. And they stick him on the top power play unit and he's still not as active as he should be. And you make a good point about Dylan Cousins. There's been a lot of trade speculation with him maybe being out the door. There's a lot of teams that have reportedly called Buffalo on him. I don't know if the Devils are one of them. Cousins had signed to a long-term deal, so I'm sure the Devils would have to give up more than just a Dawson Mercer to make a deal like that more attractive to Buffalo. So we'll see if if anything like that happens. I would expect something like that to be a off season, or as you put it, a draft day type of thing rather than this year. I think that again, you're going to see the Devils be active in terms of finding a third line center, regardless of when Eric Holla comes back, and probably a scoring winger. Pierre LeBrun of the Athletics sat down with Tom Fitzgerald yesterday, and Pierre LeBrun came out with an article earlier this morning about talking to Tom Fitzgerald about what is he looking for. And he was basically very transparent about it. Said, look, I'm looking for center help and I'm looking to add a winger. And I've talked about, options, this, that, and the other things. So it's gonna be interesting between now and the trade deadline when the Devils make a move and what move they end up making, because there's a lot of different options. Joe, is there before we wrap up this episode, is there one other prospect that stands out to you that maybe Devils fans don't know as much about?
So one of the other guys that I always look back to, like for instance, we always look at let's say the Seamus Casey's of the world. I would always say keep your eyes out on, let's say, Anton Silayev. Like,
Mm,
yeah, he was drafted 10th overall, but he gets overshadowed because he's still playing in the KHL. He's a
hmm
big physical guy, but he can also really shoot the puck, and he's definitely going to grow to be someone of a favorite player. You know, when I was with Draft Pro last year, I got a glimpse of him. He did have a little bit of a knee injury in the KHL, but he came back stronger than ever.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he's so fast with his feet that he looks like a headman. But to me, he's like a if you mixed Nikita Zadorov, Zdeno Char together, he's that kind of guy.
Hmm.
He's gonna he's far better than Muhammad Doolin will ever be.
I
He's
fair enough.
he's
Fair enough.
he's light years away.
hmm
This guy he's the total meaning of a Sasquatch defenseman. He
Mm.
hits, block shots, really good with takeaways, and gets points.
Yeah.
So when I tell people in my articles, total Sasquatch score,
Yeah.
hits, blocks, points,
hmm
takeaways, those four, you take the four,
hmm
You take that total, divide by
Mhm.
4, that's your total Sasquatch score average.
Gotcha.
So if you want a good example, you want a good, better bottom six to forward, Brazo from Boston is actually better than Jake Evans.
Hmm. Interesting.
So
I know his name has come up a little bit recently in terms of somebody the Bruins may move on from. Also,
because he,
maybe Trent Frederick, but that's kind of up in the
I
air,
would
I
love to
think.
get Frederick, but the thing is, what about that contract?
Well, that's the thing that's going to make it hard for any team. Is like, what about the deal? You know,
But I would absolutely welcome back Connor Clifton one of these days. But I think there's a bit of bad history from a more
Jersey
recent
kid, mind you, everybody. He went to CBA.
from Long Branch.
Yep, he's from Long Branch, which is like literally next to where I'm from. So, uh, but yeah, obviously, what happened when he was in Buffalo, I think it was when he was in Buffalo, um,
Yeah,
has certainly rubbed some Devils fans the wrong way. But I'll say this: it's exactly like the whole Taylor Hall rumors. It's like, so what? Move on from it and focus on the now and focus on can thus and so player help us now. And I think that's really what I don't think Tom Fitzgerald is really looking at things like that too deeply and just focusing on can they fit in this locker room and can they help us win?
but I will say this: to me, a Brazo type guy like him, he would absolutely not only win a lot of puck battles, but he would definitely destroy a hell out of a Matt Rempe.
Hmm.
We need those kind of
Man,
guys going forward
I'm not worried
in the
about Matt Rippey at
playoffs.
this point.
But what I'm saying is, like, we need those guys now
Hmm.
that can fortify our bottom six. You know, not just have Nathan Bastion around. I
Mm.
mean, how long are you going to have him
Yeah, I Bastion hasn't. If I'm being honest, Bastion has not been the same
since
since.
Michael McLeod left?
Yeah, I'm glad you said it and I didn't. And look, obviously what's happened with McLeod is very bad, and I don't want to really get into it because
Right.
it's not appropriate.
I
But
said the
like,
same thing with Trey.
yeah, it's like I think I think he's just really struggling, and I think that it might be easier for the Devils to find someone that could replace someone like him. Like you mentioned, a couple of names. So we'll see. Again, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. I think Tom Fitzgerald is being patient because I don't think he wants to make a desperate move. And I don't and Tom Fitzgerald is not that type of guy. He's going to try to let this team figure it out and get going again, which I think they will. And it could start this weekend with that back-to-back against Philadelphia and Ottawa. But Joe, I just want to say, man, thank you so much for jumping on today, giving us your insights on everything. I'm really happy I finally was able to get you back on the podcast. I promise you it won't take you a couple of years before you're back on again. I promise you that that won't
Yeah.
happen. Um, but before I let you go, as I do with all of my guests, you already know the drill. I like to roll out the red carpet and let the folks at home, whether they're watching here on YouTube or listening on wherever they get their podcasts, where they can find you on social media and also all of your awesome work for Pucks and Pitchforks and everywhere else that you're working for. So the floor is yours, my friend.
So for those you know me over the years, I'm on Pucks and Pitchforks, and my socials are right there. But I kind of forget my X handle, but Neil has it.
Yeah,
He'll put it down below. But
sure.
I'm also underscore Joe of Jersey on Instagram. So if you're looking for me, you want to DM me, you're more than welcome. I'm also on LinkedIn. So for those of you looking for me or Trey or Neil, we're all on there. And
Mm,
I put out stuff there time to time, but um, I'm more active on, let's say, Instagram and a little bit
hmm.
of X, but um, don't be afraid to message me. Try and get my insights. But I welcome people with different ideas for articles, whatnot. But if you have any grievances, just tell them to me. Don't necessarily put them in the comments
Yeah.
because it adds too many negativities. But hit a like and subscribe to Devil State of Mind and all the other Devils podcasts out there because we want to grow this wonderful organization, and we need to just have the Devil's faithful be faithful and not be restless.
I love that you gave me a little self plug there. I appreciate it, Joe. But again, thank you so much for coming on today. We really, really do appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And we will definitely have you back on the podcast soon, man. But thank you again. And we just appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. I can't wait to do another one of these days soon again.